I had a sort of relationship to the world and existence that I hadn't seen expressed elsewhere, and I wanted to express it in the songs that I was writing. I didn't really know for sure that anybody else felt the same way. To me, my reaction to the world was partly a kind of numbness, you know, because in the previous 6 or 8 years, everybody had been battered around so badly between the Vietnam War and all the ways in which you were seeing that what you've been brought up to think the world was like were false. The only response was to just turn away from it, reject everything. It was just kind of like throwing out some bait and seeing if they would get any nibbles. And, you know, to me, they would still be good songs and interesting material, whether or not it actually was something that described a widespread point of view. I mean, they weren't dependent on being, you know, I could belong to the blank generation and there was only one of us.
Although his tenure in the group would be relatively brief, Hell was also pivotal in bringing an energy and passion to television's live performances, and through a torn and thrown together wardrobe, in creating a defining image for both the band and the emerging scene.
The front line of Verlaine, Lloyd, and Hell was breathtaking. I mean, the guys were all great-looking guys, you know, ravaged, beautiful, young, you know, energy pouring out of them, sex pouring out of them, sensual, you know. And Hell was, you know, usually was the most exciting person to watch on stage.
I thought he was like a Paul McCartney, only goofy. Like a Paul McCartney, loopy and goofy, but, you know, and the spirit, you know, he designed all the posters, he kept us in the torn clothing. You know, as soon as he was gone, the torn clothing went the way of the wind, you know.
Television was very different when Richard Hell was in the band. Richard had an original idea and a vision of them sort of being like, I think the Bowery Boys, which, you know, but the ripped clothing, a lot of that came from just your clothes were ripped. And Richard would staple his cuffs because he didn't have cufflinks, so they'd just be stapled. I mean, some of it was contrived that you'd wear something that was quite ripped on stage, but it became like their look. It just looked like you were kind of found in the garbage can. Or the Dolls had that song Trash, you know, they would borrow their girlfriend's clothes. That's how their look developed. And so they knew, I think Richard and television knew they didn't want to be glitter glam. That wasn't going to be their thing. They wanted to be more macho looking, but they still wanted to look original. That was something I always really liked about rock and roll, was that it was a whole way of life. You know, you dressed in a way that was consistent with your emotional and intellectual message too, and what you named the band, and then even for me, what I named myself. I wanted all those things to be consistent, but the idea was to demonstrate how you could reinvent yourself. And that was part of what was really thrilling about rock and roll. But I realized eventually that was kind of idealistic and a delusion too, because of course what happened was instead everybody copies what you do.
Television were like nothing that had come before them, and within 3 months of their first show they were attracting a lot of attention. The most high-profile praise came from David Bowie, once again with his antennae out for anything emerging from the Lower East Side, who claimed they were the most original band he'd seen in New York. As Terry Ork and the group had intended, soon CBGB began to attract other acts, including ex-Mercer Staples' Suicide and the Stilettos, a girl group who had debuted at the Arts Center shortly before its collapse. This band, which would become the opening act for television, was formed by Elder Gentile, the partner of first Eric Emerson and then the New York Dolls' Sylvain Sylvain, and a young Debbie Harry, a regular at the Dolls' gigs and a waitress at Max's Kansas City.
I said to myself, you know, I've been promoting Eric here. I've been promoting the Dolls. You know, I wonder if I could do this myself. And that's when I went to Max's and saw Debbie and said to Debbie, she was waitressing, you know, I said, I'm thinking of starting a band, and, you know, I think I want to get a couple of girls, and this is my concept. I liked her because I liked her from the Dolls. And here she was waitressing. And I said, you're not doing much better than me if you're waitressing in this joint, you know. And she was somebody that I wouldn't have minded to go on the trip. I said to her, can you sing? She said, yeah, I can sing. I said, what do you think? You want to start a band? So she said, yeah, call me.
While at the Mercer Arts Centre, the Stilettos had been through a wealth of male backing musicians before Chris Stein, a close friend of Eric Emerson, was invited to join the band. With bassist Fred Smith and drummer Billy O'Connor, the act that would become Blondie was personally asked to consider playing CBGB by Terry Ork.
Terry Ork had invited me to come down and see the place. And I said, this is really cool. He says, you want to play? I said, yeah, put us on the bill. Let's go. I really liked the size of it because it was bigger than Max's. And television, I just loved television. I thought that Richard Hell was totally the new kid on the block, because now you had somebody who was introducing a different kind of energy into the music. It wasn't flash and flam and, you know, and that kind of thing, even though we loved that when it was there, but it was attitude.
By June, Television, Suicide and the Stilettos were playing various dates at CBGB, all very different bands, each channeling distinct elements of New York culture into their music and performance.
The Stilettos were a group, you know, the name gives it away a little bit. They were trying to be a continuation of the girl group of the 60s. And, you know, we talked so much about Beats and Warhol and the underground and the avant-garde. A massive part of the New York City music scene was the R&B vocal groups, and then after they'd really had their wondrous moments in the 50s, we had a girl group thing happening in the 60s. Happened with the Ronettes and the Shangri-Las in particular, not just those groups, you know, the Angels and other groups were also important, the Crystals, all of these New York groups. What the Stilettos were trying to do was, in a way, be a continuation of the Shangri-Las and the Ronettes, but now infuse it with that cabaret thing that was going on in the early 70s as the sort of rock theatre, the ridiculous theatre. That also, when that moved along a bit, it became more cabaret. So there's a big cabaret movement. The gay scene is happening, you know. So all of these things, again, are all mixing and matching.
They were doo-wop. They were a three-girl doo-wop band. I thought it was kind of a sweet idea, but no, you know, I wasn't big on them. But, you know, they deserved it. They deserved to be there. You know, they deserved the round, you know. Not everybody's going to be. That's the whole point. It's an incubator. It's like a little nest, you know, with eggs. And some of them hatch and some of them don't. It's an incubator. And they belonged in it. And look what happened.
They were cool. I remember they played CBs, all hot and everything. And Debbie was very beautiful. She was a gorgeous girl, very sweet, very down-to-earth, sweet person. It's the first thing you always like about her. She's like lovable. She is like the girl next door. I never fell in love with her, stuff like that, although other guys have, of course. They all fell in love with her. But I just kind of was like the girl next door. But one day, out of nowhere, I'm sitting at CBGBs, pretty much by myself, sitting with some jazz guy, a friend of Marty's. And she comes running down the aisle, and he sits down next to me. Al, how was it? How was it? I'm going, what are you even asking me? Who are you? You know what I mean? I don't know you. Why are you asking me for? I'm from Suicide, man. I'm crazy. What are you bothered? But she's, Al, how are we? How are you? How was it? I was so shocked by it. So I just kept cool with her, man. You know, it was just, I couldn't believe she like knew who I was, or even gave a damn, or even cared about what I thought about what she was doing, which I thought was okay. It wasn't the greatest thing in the world, but I thought she did have something, you know.
As the CBGB scene was developing, the New York Dolls were still busy chasing the dream. At the end of 1973, they had completed a successful European tour, while their tendency to divide US rock fans was confirmed by the Dolls being voted both the worst and the best new group by readers of Cream magazine in the end-of-year poll. Even if they had yet to win over the rest of America, however, they were still kings of the hill in their hometown.
Within the scene, they were huge. They were the Rolling Stones, and they ruled the back room at Max's, and they were sort of mini celebrities, but in a mini world, they were maxi celebrities, really. And to me, they acted like stars, and they behaved like stars, and people followed them very closely. The first time I saw them, they were playing at a different club every night, so it was like a tour within New York, that they'd play this club one night and then this club. And the same people would go to see them every night at different clubs. It was a crowd of people that dressed in a certain way and had a certain sensibility and knew all their songs and were big fans. And I think there was a perception that, you know, the Dolls were going to make it at some point.
Unknown to many, the band were deteriorating rapidly. Both guitarist Johnny Thunders and drummer Jerry Nolan had developed serious drug problems, while bassist Arthur Kane was battling with alcoholism. The release of the band's second album in May 1974, the aptly titled Too Much Too Soon, was a nail in their coffin.
I think the problem that we felt in New York Dolls was not that their first record didn't live up to expectations, that it wasn't good enough or didn't sell enough. It almost broke the top 100, didn't quite. It generated a lot of press. You know, historically, record companies in the 70s were investing in bands. You know, they expected to make the money back around the third album. I think historically we've looked back and said it was a failure. I don't think it was. I think the failure was the second album. The fact that the second album was not an artistic triumph, that the band developed drug and drink problems, that the production was bad, they didn't write songs for the second album. And then it turned out that all these groups they'd influenced started having their own scene at CBGBs, and the New York Dolls were left behind. I think their manager, Marty Tao, who ends up being involved in the punk scenes, I think he called it their passion for life. And it was their passion for life that in a way really got in the way of their second album, and there was no coming back after that second album.